Welcome into the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. My name is Jarrett Samuels. I'm the host of the podcast. Men, as always, I'd like to begin by thanking you for listening to or watching today's podcast episode. When you get the opportunity, be sure to visit the pursuitofmanliness.com. On the homepage, you can find this podcast episode, the whole catalog of nearly 500 podcast episodes. You can learn about the herd, tribe, the men's retreat. Check out the gear store. In the gear store, I want to highlight 90 Days of Discipline. This is brand new. It is an initiative to lead men to focus on the 4 areas of the framework for biblical manhood. We want to be spiritually sound, mentally strong, relationally established, and physically fit. During the 90 days, men are given a daily plan of action. You are placed in an accountability group. You will have initiatives and goals to set in ways that you can connect with people within this community to be sure you start the first 90 days of 2025 as effective and focused as possible. I want you to know the registration is open only until Sunday, December 29th. I also want to remind you this podcast episode is sponsored by Dark Water Woodwork, darkwaterkc.com. You guys know me. I'm a sucker for Christmas, and Doug has nailed it. He has a St. Nick starter kit with an ornament bundle, St. Nick balm and oil combo with an ornament. He has all kinds of Christmas type things on his site. You need to check it out. If you check out the show notes, you will find a discount code where you'll save money on your order. darkwaterkc.com. Men, it is time for today's podcast episode. Well, brother, let's pray. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for waking us up. We thank you for technology. We thank you for your grace and your mercy, and we thank you for your word. God, I pray for Brother Prager here, and I thank you for the work that you've laid upon his heart. I can't even fathom doing what he does and this commentary and what we're going to discuss. And I pray it's a blessing to the guys that listen to this, whether they're going down the road, on vacation, working out, wherever they're at. God, they've given something to consider that you are on your throne, and we thank you for that. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, men, at this time, I want to welcome Mr. Dennis Prager to the podcast. Brother, thanks for being on the show today.
It's an honor to be with you.
It is a busy time for you, I know, and in our country. So thank you for making time.
Well, you're to say the least, you're worth it. Thank you.
Well, brother, I love books about books, and I preach the Bible. So I love to have books that are about books of the Bible. You put together a commentary. I don't even know how you begin to do this. Well, would you just give me that? Like, hey, this is where I felt like I'm going to start putting together Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and so on.
Well, at a very young age, I fell in love with the Torah. Now, I love the whole Bible, but I'm in love with the first 5 books, the Torah, the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, whatever term one wishes to use. Everything emanates from those 5 books. The rest of the Old Testament, the New Testament, no Torah, no Judaism, no Christianity. The Torah is from creation, Garden of Eden, the 10 Commandments, love God, love your neighbor. In effect, to a very large extent, not entirely, everything is there. And the problem is, and it is a problem, if you just pick it up and read it, you can certainly, for example, understand the stories. You don't need a commentator to explain that Cain kills Abel. Okay, he was jealous of his brother's sacrifice, and he killed him. Although there's a tremendous amount to be said about that story. But for example, how does one explain eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? Isn't that barbaric sounding? So you need someone to explain. There's a law. You can't mix linen and wool in the same garment. Sounds bizarre, but it's one of the most profound laws. And by the way, it follows immediately after love your neighbor as yourself. How's that for the Torah really throwing a curveball at you?
Right.
So I have studied this all of my life in the Hebrew. I've taught it all of my life from the Hebrew. And I over the course of years, I did verse by verse as a teacher. And then I realized I have to make this available
Mm.
and write it up. And it's not a written version of the oral teaching. It's unique unto itself.
Mm.
And there are 5,000 reviews on on Amazon,
Mm.
and Salem was my syndicator.
Mm.
And uh, people can read how it has touched their lives. And it's mostly Christians writing in. I'm a Jew, I'm a believing Jew. Uh, so the latest volume, it's a 10-year project. The fourth of the 5 volumes is the Book of Numbers,
Mm.
which is an extremely boring word in English. I mean, who on God's earth wants to read a book of numbers unless you're a mathematician? In Hebrew, the Hebrew is much more exciting. The Hebrew name for the fourth book of the Torah, of the Bible, is in the wilderness.
Yeah.
That's a little more interesting than numbers, but
Right.
it
Right.
is what it is. I tell people it doesn't matter which of the volumes you begin with. If one has not read, I call it the Rational Bible, and that'd be my final. I'm giving you too long an answer, but you ask such a gigantic question, it's hard to shorten it. So I call it the Rational Bible, and that is because everything I write is rooted in reason and to make things understandable. When I write this, my imaginary reader is a peasant in China who never heard of Moses, who may never heard of God. And can I make this so that he or she will understand it?
Yep.
I never ask people to accept something on faith.
Mm.
So it's called the Rational Bible. I use reason to come to faith. And that's so the newest volume, and if one doesn't have the other volumes, it's just as good to start with this one, is the fourth book in the wilderness, the Book of Numbers.
Yeah, you're right. In the very first verse mentions in the wilderness. I think more people would read it if it was called in the wilderness. It would be more
Yes,
intriguing. It's a
right.
fascinating book. I mean, it's more than just an algebra class. It is fascinating. There's so much there. Pretty quickly, we come in contact with the tabernacle. What role did the tabernacle play when it came to the Jewish people?
I have a I have a thought that I think you in particular as a serious religious person would appreciate. The holy protects the ethical.
Mm.
Secular society doesn't understand holy. It's sort of voodoo.
Hmm.
They mock, oh, he's a holy man. It's sort of a joke. But uh, I'll give one example. They have the broken windows theory about crime, that if you let broken windows go unprosecuted and unrepaired, that will lead to more serious crime, and you'll end up with rape and murder later.
Okay.
When people started to curse publicly, I'm not talking privately, there is a difference. When people started to curse publicly, I knew we're headed downhill ethically,
Mm.
not just in terms of holiness. And that's of course it's happened. So that's my overriding case for the importance of the holy. So the tabernacle, and in it, by the way, my uh, beloved imagery in the tabernacle is the Holy of Holies and the Ark. What does the Ark contain? The Ten Commandments.
Mhm.
This is literally the holy protecting the ethical,
Mhm.
because the Ten Commandments are overwhelmingly about the ethical. how we treat our fellow human being. 6 of the commandments are about that.
Mhm.
So anyway, the tabernacle was the central place to meet God, so to speak. And I explain, especially in Leviticus, which is the last volume I'll be doing, what the whole sacrificial system was about. And that is much more complex than people think it is. What does it even mean to sacrifice? And I'll just give a hint where knowing the Hebrew is very helpful. The Hebrew word for sacrifice is korban,
Mhm.
and it comes from the root. Almost all Hebrew words have a 3-letter root. The root of that, KRV, it sounds like KRB, but the B and V are the same word but with a dot in it. And it means to get close. And when you think about it, how do you get close to anyone is when you sacrifice for them. It's why we're so close to our children, because we've made these sacrifices.
Mhm.
Sacrifice and closeness are deeply related. How there are people who instinctively feel God. I'm not one of them.
Mhm.
I need an instruction manual, which is one of the reasons I love the Torah. It's my instruction manual. And the sacrificial system is an instruction manual on getting close to God.
Yeah, we just wrapped up or are wrapping up an election cycle in the United States. At least we think we're wrapping it up. And I always wonder, like, why would people want to be in positions to lead other people? It's exhausting. And you set yourself up for critique and ridicule in your family and so on. Moses didn't want to lead these people. Moses never applied for this job. He didn't say, hey, sign me up. I got Aaron. He'll make a great vice. No, this is God saying, he chose him. He put him here. And they grumble and they complain. They're exhausting. And then in Numbers, we see God taking care of them with, water from the rock and manna from heaven. And what do we learn about human behavior in that experience with the manna in the water?
Well, that's one of my favorite subjects. I'll tell you what we learn. We learn a lesson, and the whole rational Bible is lessons applicable to today, because human nature is the same today as it was 3,000 years ago. So the stuff is eternal. So here's what we learn. What did the Israelites or Jews or Hebrews do almost immediately after leaving Egypt and hundreds of years of horrible slavery? They complain, and get this people don't know this. Most people don't. I know you do. But they say to Moses, we want to go back to Egypt. The food was better. What is the great lesson to be learned there? It is not true that people yearn to be free. People yearn to be taken care of. That is why the left wins all over the world. They have a trade. I think it's diabolic, but nevertheless, you give us your freedom, we take care of you. And most people will make that trade.
Yeah, I was telling my kids that recently. Lazy people all seem to go the same direction. It's inevitable. You watch the ebb and flow of
Inevitable.
things. One of the things we see in Numbers is there's a point where God says, "That's it." And one of the things that we see is the serpent that begins to, if you wreak havoc in the camp. Takeaways from that experience: people complaining. There's consequences to our attitude, to our heart, to behavior, and what comes after that.
So it's really important to understand God, who is described as a compassionate and patient being. There is something he really gets impatient with: complaining. But it's not just complaining. Complaining represents something much worse than complaining. Complaining is a nuisance, but it represents an evil. The evil is ingratitude. Ingratitude is one of the roots of evil. Evil has a lot of roots. One of them is ingratitude. Gratitude is the mother of goodness and happiness. So ingratitude is the mother of misery and meanness. There is no good in great. There's no happy in great. And what the Israelites in general were ingrates. And this drove God nuts. So to use a human metaphor, that's a big lesson there. They wait a minute. I take you out of Egypt. I bring 10 plagues on Egypt. I split the sea. I give you food every day in the desert, and you're complaining? That's God's attitude. And you're ungrateful for all of that? But that's the human condition. People are grateful for good things done to them for anywhere between an hour and a day. But
Well,
they remember bad things that happened to them for
forever.
40 years.
That's right. We're good until we're hungry again, and then they were good until they got hungry one more time. But
Yeah, but they no, it's actually worse. They weren't hungry. They just preferred the meat in Egypt to the manna in the desert. They were never hungry.
I know they're talking about the meat pots they had as they sat around like
Yes,
you were
exactly.
miserable, you were terrible.
No, no, yes. We like the menu there. So what if we were slaves? That is what, by the way, a good chunk of America and Europe think.
Hmm.
We like being taken care of. We don't really care if we're free.
Yeah, one of the things that Joshua learns from Moses is don't tell people when you're sending in spies because Joshua doesn't tell anybody. Moses evidently did. He sends in spies in the promised land, says, take a look, see what you think. They come back. Joshua and Caleb are like, thumbs up, it's a go. 10 guys are like, not at all. What do we learn about fear and foreboding from the 10 spies that come back, which cause people to rebel against Moses and ultimately God?
That's right. It's really amazing. The God who took them out of Egypt promises them you will be victorious in your moving in and warring to live in the promised land. And still 10 spies say we can't do it. They'll kill us. They'll eat us up. It's truly in retrospect it's astonishing, but it's not astonishing. People, first of all, people don't want to fight, uh, and we have that again today. It's do people fight to preserve liberty? Do people fight? I mean, I'm not an FDR fan, but he certainly led the country effectively in World War II, which is no mean feat. If people read his speeches, it would be inconceivable to deliver them today. We are fighting to protect Christian civilization, he would say over and over. And I'm a Jew saying he's right. That's correct. That's right. And we would never use that.
I, I I've
We
said it
would,
often. Teddy
I'm
Roosevelt.
sorry.
There were others that would speak those words. I don't think we can handle it today. I don't think we
Oh,
can.
no, no, no. It's inconceivable.
Yes.
Well, and what has happened is we don't forget the word Christian. We don't protect Western civilization. There's nothing special about it. That's what a vast number of young Americans believe. So why fight if there's nothing to protect?
Well, I also think that fear has a way of creeping in. It becomes a reality, whether it's rational or not. You think about when you're a kid and you saw a shadow in your room, you were convinced that was a bad guy till you turn the light on, you say it isn't. You turn the light off, you're going, nope, bad guy again. And I think that's what people do. They create this irrational fear in their mind and say, no, it has to be worst case scenario. And even like you said, God had literally just led them out in from slavery into the wilderness, going towards the promised land. And they said, no, we want to go back. At least we knew what we had. It's like being in an abusive relationship. At least I knew what I had. One of the strangest stories in the Bible, and I remember telling a friend of mine who was new to the faith about this, is Balaam. That's a wild one. You get Numbers 22. You got a talking donkey. What do we learn from Balaam?
It's truly one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And as soon as you said strange, I knew you were going to go to Balaam's donkey. I knew it. It's in a nutshell, there's a king who wants to destroy the Israelites. He doesn't want them to invade or even pass through his country. And he asks a pagan prophet named Balaam to curse Israel. and he will give Balaam, he will make him the richest man in the world if he just does that. So it's a fascinating story. Will Balaam do it? Because Balaam actually believed in the God Jehovah, the God of the Jews. He believed in he wasn't a Jew, and he the whole story about what happens. The king, his name is Balak, and he's trying to bribe Balaam into cursing Israel. And it's really ironic because one of the words that Balaam does use to describe the Jews, it is a people that will dwell alone. And when you look at how the UN hates Israel, it's uncanny how accurate that is about a people dwelling alone. Anyway, my favorite part of that story there is actually the interrelationship between Balaam and his donkey. So there's an angel of God standing in the road. The donkey sees it and stops going because he's scared. The angel has a sword, and the Balaam doesn't see the angel. So first of all, it is such a brilliant notion. This venerated prophet can't see as well as his donkey. The donkey sees better metaphorically. It's so brilliant. Who's the ass? Literal, almost literally in the story. And the answer is Balaam. Then there was a subtext that I really do emphasize, and that is empathy with animals. So he starts hitting his donkey for not moving. And the donkey then speaks up, and the donkey doesn't talk theology. The donkey says, I've been loyal to you all these years. Why are you hitting me? And it's hilarious because you would think Balaam would go, what? My donkey is talking to me? Wouldn't you do that? I mean, I have two dogs. If either of them said one day, I thought you had a good show day, Dennis, is really, I was listening. I wouldn't say, really? What'd you think of it? I would have gone, you're talking? What is going on here? Anyway, he answers his donkey, but it's so powerful. I mean, it really is, among other things, the metaphor that the donkey sees better than the prophet, the phony prophet, but it is also a statement about us and animals. You know, if your animal could talk to you, what would your animal say to you about your treatment of him or her? I think uh, there's the Torah has a big concern with animals. Most people who even know the Ten Commandments don't know that your animal has to rest on the Sabbath. No other civilization had a law that your animals have to rest. It's one of the reasons I love it.
It's one of the reasons why I don't own animals, so I don't have to worry about resting on the Sabbath. It's
Yeah.
I'm not a pet guy. Okay, uh, man, I appreciate you doing this. I know you're crunched for time. I have two questions. The
No,
first
no,
one,
go ahead. Absolutely.
you
Your enjoy.
you disappear if you have to. I'm not going to take it personal, but I am curious when you study this and you think of our current events in 2024. When you juxtapose what you see in Israel in the Old Testament and what you see in 2024, are there anything similar and anything that you see as a Jew that you'd say, okay, this is what I think God is trying to show us, teach us, what we need to learn from this?
The there was a Catholic scholar, Edward Flannery, many years ago, uh, who wrote a book, A History of Anti-Semitism. He was a Catholic priest, and he wrote, "The Jews brought a judging God into the world, and they've never been forgiven." And that's I think that's accurate. Half the Jews don't even have a particular faith. So this is not it's not a statement Jews are terrific, because a lot of Jews are not terrific, to say the least. But that's irrelevant. The Jewish people is chosen doesn't mean Jewish people are wonderful. The two facts are unrelated. And uh, it is not possible to understand Jew hatred without reference to God and chosenness. Because among other things, Jew hatred is unique. It's called anti-Semitism, but it's a silly name. Jew hatred is unique because it always involves the extermination of Jews. There is no other ethnic hatred in the world where the hater wants to exterminate the hated group. They hate them, they want to persecute them, they want to vanquish them, they want to conquer them, even persecute them. But with Jews, anti-Semitism is unique. There are 210 nations in the world. Only one is targeted for extinction, the Jewish one. 22 Arab states, one Jewish state the size of New Jersey, and the whole surrounding Muslim world wants to eradicate it. And a lot of the Western world is supportive. So I see God in these events totally.
Yeah, and this is unrelated. Maybe it's related. I don't know. That's I think what shocks me the most, at least in my lifetime in the last 5 to 10 years, is how much the Western world suddenly has. It's evil. It's just pure evil that to think to want to exterminate the Jewish people. I just yeah.
Yep.
So
Well, thank you. Wisdom begins with fear of God, right? That
right.
famous line in was it Proverbs or the Song of Songs? I always forget.
Proverbs. Yeah.
Proverbs, yeah. And
Yeah.
and I learned that when I was at Columbia University in the graduate school because I was being taught nonsense in the 1970s. This is not new.
Mhm.
And I remember, and I wrote about this, how I found God at Columbia. I had studied in the yeshiva, Jewish religious school, till I was 19, half the day in Hebrew, half the day in English. And all of a sudden, this phrase from the Bible came back into my brain in Hebrew out of nowhere. Wisdom begins with the fear of God.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, yeah, now I know why there's no wisdom at Columbia. There's no God at Columbia. The Western world is suffering from the post-God age in which it lives,
Yep.
post-biblical age. That's the that's the reason people could say men give birth, or Israel is an apartheid state. Two equally gigantic lies. It has lost its moral bearing
Mhm.
because it has lost its Judeo-Christian roots.
Yeah, and if you read the prophets, one of the first things that happens to a nation is wisdom dissipates, and you're left with just knuckleheadedness because people don't have time for wisdom. They don't have time for logic. They don't have time for to be taught self-control,
Right.
self-respect, any of those things. But that's a different conversation. One last question. I told you, Megan, I'm a Christian. I'm just curious. You study the Bible through and through. You know it better than I do. You exegete these texts. Do you ever come across a text and you say, that sounds like Jesus? That sounds like
Yes,
that could be him.
there are undoubtedly texts that sound like Jesus. The the this is obviously another at least 45 minutes. And I discuss it with Christians a great deal because I have no issue with Christians evangelizing. It's done out of love. I receive it as coming from love, so it's a non-issue for me. But there are many factors, including simply my belief as a Jew is that direct revelation, ended with Malachi, the last prophet. And just as the Christian believes, it ends after the book of Revelation.
Mhm.
And so they don't accept later claims of revelation, whether it be Islam or Latter-day Saints, Mormons.
Mhm.
Everyone has a sort of a cutoff period. So the Jews have ours.
Mhm.
What I see in Jesus and Christianity is a God-given. See, I don't believe Christians are living in error.
Mhm.
The fact that I don't believe as Christians do, it has never occurred to me, oh, you're just wrong. I never. You are doing God's work. You, among other things, you're spreading the Torah that he gave to us. The
Mm,
world knows about the Torah thanks to Christians, not thanks to Jews. The
mm,
Jews brought it in, obviously,
right.
but it's Christians who made, people, pagans in Britain and in Argentina, indigenous tribes know about it.
Right.
And that's why I'm a big fan of the word Judeo-Christian. We need each other. So I'll end with this. You'll find this at least thought-provoking, if not even somewhat entertaining. I actually believe, and if I didn't believe it, believe me, I wouldn't say it because I'd look like a fool. I think I have brought more people back to church than any living Christian. And I'm a practicing, believing Jew. And it gives me great joy that I have done that. A guy came over to me, and this isn't even back to church. This is to church. I just spoke a few weeks ago at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island.
Mhm.
And a student comes over to me and goes, "Hi, Mr. Prager," shakes my hand. "Can I get a selfie with you? I just want you to know you made me a conservative." He's a Hindu from India. And I go, "Thank you. It means a lot to me." He says, "No, not just that. You made me believe in the God of the Bible." I go, "Whoa." I'm very, very happy to hear that. Not only that, I converted to Christianity. So this is a Hindu
Right.
telling a Jew
Right.
that he converted to Christianity, and the Jew is happy about it. So I think if I'm wrong, I still think God will go, "You know what, Prager? You did a lot of good work for me."
Well, I'm thankful I don't get to work the gate of who's in, who's out. I know I just try to get myself in, but Mr. Prager, I really do appreciate what you're doing. This is incredible. I honestly, up till recently, didn't know you were doing this, but all the things you do, thank you. I don't get an opportunity to have these conversations like this, so thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I hope people will get the Rational Bible. It's a great Christmas gift. It's a beautifully published book.
Amen.
Thank you.
Once again, men, I want to thank you for listening to or watching today's podcast episode. I want to remind you of a few things. If you would, make sure you click subscribe. That way you never miss any Pursuit of Manliness content. If you would, leave a review. I always appreciate that. And when you share the show. Also, be sure to visit the gear store, thepursuitofmanliness.com/gear, and take a look at 90 Days of Discipline. Registration is open until Sunday, December 29th. Make sure you start the first 90 days of 2025 with the right focus and in the right community. Men, thanks for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.